Welcome to the next installment of the Train Vicar. Today I'll look at the Wellington suburban train system. That's probably the best passenger train system in New Zealand at the moment. In recent years, the Auckland train system has had greater patronage than the one in Wellington, but of course Auckland is also a lot bigger, has a bigger population than Wellington. So proportionally, a lot more people take the train in Wellington.
About 7% of all trips to work in the Wellington region are taken by train. This is the highest of any New Zealand region. In Auckland, it's only about 1.6% of trips to work. Wellington also has a high proportion of people travelling by bus. Overall, the public transport system in Wellington is the best in New Zealand. And that's why Wellington also has the lowest proportion of travel to work by private motor vehicle in New Zealand. Good public transport can do that. So how come Wellington, of all the cities in New Zealand, has such a good train system? I think it comes down to geography, history, and tenacity by Wellingtonians to hang on to the railway system. As the capital of New Zealand and the southernmost city of the North Island, Wellington was quite early actually well connected to other regions by rail. Now, Wellington isn't easy to access by rail. It sits right beside a big harbour and it's enclosed by hills on all sides. The railway lines that connect Wellington had to cross significant hills or even mountain ranges. The line going north, which is now the North Island main trunk, has to pass through the Ngauranga Hills to the Porirua Harbour and then along steep terrain near Pukerua Bay. The line to the east to the Wairarapa has to pass through the Remotaka Ranges, quite a formidable obstacle. But overcoming those obstacles has made railways more valuable. The government helped build a railway line through the Hutt Valley and through the Remotaka Ranges by 1878. The private Wellington and Manawatu Railway Company built a line through the hilly sections north of Wellington to Palmerston North, with the full line opening in 1886. The government took over the line between Wellington and Palmerston North in 1908 and from the late 1920s onward built a few tunnels to bypass the most tortuous section just out of Wellington. This decision, in a sense, initiated the modern Wellington suburban system. At the time, it was decided to keep the former main line between Wellington and Johnsonville for suburban services and electrify it. Electric multiple units built by English Electric were introduced in 1938. The new main line with its many tunnels was also electrified through to Paikakariki from its opening in 1937. But it seems electric locomotives only worked the line from about 1938 onwards. Both lines were electrified with 1,500 volt DC current. The line east to the Hutt Valley was rerouted in the 1950s and electrified by 1955. For many years, English Electric units operated most suburban services, with additional trains hauled by electric locomotives such as the ED class and the EW class. There are now three main suburban lines in the Wellington region. The Johnsonville line runs from the Wellington railway station along the former main line, along many curves, through the northern suburbs to Johnsonville. It's about 10.5 kilometers long. On this line, the old English Electric units continued to operate longer than on any of the other lines. When new electric multiple units were introduced in the 1980s, the old English Electric units continued on the Johnsonville line due to the many tight tunnels and the very tight curves. The old units received a new exterior color scheme of olive green and cream, and later on they were modernized again with a blue exterior color scheme and an upgrade of the interior. They lasted until 2012, when new electric multiple units were introduced. The line at that time was upgraded for the new rolling stock. Rather than enlarging the tunnels, the profile of the new trains was calculated and the location of the rails within the tunnels determined by computer simulation. This required less actual physical work, sometimes only requiring the rails and tunnels to be moved somewhat. Services on this line normally operate every half hour during off-peak time and every 15 minutes during peak time. Most of the line is single track with only a few passing loops. When running at 30-minute frequency, trains cross at Ngaio, and at 15-minute frequency they also cross at Kandala and at the crossing loop in the Ngaio Gorge. Well, let's get to the second line, the Kapiti line, which runs from Wellington through the Taba tunnels, then through Porirua and Pukerua Bay to the Kapiti coast, with its current terminus in Waikanai. Originally, the electrification only went as far as Paikakariki, about 39 kilometers north of Wellington. During steam days there, electric and steam traction was changed for any trains going further north. Then later on, the electrification was extended to Paraparaumu, about further 9 kilometers away, and finally to Waikanai, which is about 56 kilometers north of Wellington. On this line and the line to the Hutt Valley, 44 new electric multiple units were introduced from 1982. These were manufactured by Guns Mamag in Hungary. From late 2010, new electric multiple units made by Hyundai Rotem in South Korea were introduced. These are called the Matangi trains. During the weekend and during off-peak times, trains operate every 30 minutes, stopping at all stations. On weekdays, into peak, it's often every 20 minutes. During peak times, there are trains that stop at every station between Wellington and Porirua and then terminate there. These operate every 20 minutes. And then in addition, there are also trains that run without stopping between Wellington and Porirua and then stop at every station from there to Waikanai. These also operate every 20 minutes. And in the morning peak, it's the reverse pattern with trains going towards Wellington, some starting in Porirua and others from Waikanai and running without stop from Porirua. Much of the line between Pukerua Bay and Paikakariki is single track. There it clings to the cliff above the coastline. The section is slow, susceptible to weather events, and is a real capacity constraint, but the views are actually quite amazing. The Hutt Valley line runs from Wellington along the Wellington Harbour to the flat Hutt Valley. In Petone, a short branch line connects to Melling. The main line continues from Petone via the Waterloo interchange to Upper Hutt. It crosses the Hutt River 3 times there. The city centre of Lower Hutt has no direct connection to the railway, but the Wellington station is not too far away from the city centre. After the Guns Mamag trains were introduced in the 1980s, the old English electric unit survived a bit longer here, running some of the peak trains between Taita and Wellington. For a few years before the new Matangi trains were introduced from 2011 onwards, there was such a surge in passenger numbers that some of the old trains had to be taken out from the museum and put back in service. Also, locomotives that once worked through the Otira Tunnel in the Southern Alps were equipped to work with carriage trains on the Wellington network, and they operated there for about 3 years. Trains on the Melling line operate approximately every 20 minutes during peak times and then every hour during the day, but there are no trains on the Melling line in the evenings or on weekends. The line to Upper Hutt has a similar operating pattern as the Kapiti line. During off-peak, trains run every 30 minutes or every 20 minutes between peaks on weekdays. And during peak times, trains stopping at every station run between Wellington and Taita every 20 minutes and terminate there. And then overlapping that are trains that just stop at Waterloo Junction between Wellington and Taita and then continue as a stopping service to Upper Hutt. These trains also run every 20 minutes. In addition to these electric trains, there are diesel-hauled trains through the Remutaka Tunnel to Masterton and one return diesel train from Palmerston North to Wellington on weekdays. As you can see, Wellington has quite a good train system, even though for railway fans it's not as varied as it used to be. The train system is not perfect, and for example, right across the railway line passes this ugly motorway from which pollution spews forth as if it were from hell. So a brief reflection as the train vicar. I've previously suggested in a video that Wellington shows us, at least in its incipient form, what transport heaven is like, so to say. Well, here on Earth, there are also people and communities that can show us what the kingdom of heaven is like and how God intersects with the world. Of course, in its fullest form, Jesus was here present on Earth and showed us what heaven is like. But even then, with the disciples around him, we realized that it was not only heavenly, that there was quite a bit of human coming into it. But through being with Jesus, they were changed and they proclaimed the kingdom of heaven throughout the world. We ourselves need example of people through whom heaven shows on this earth, just as we need examples on what different ways of moving people can be like in this country.